We are back, ladies and gentlemen, with our second week of our creature spotlights. This week, we're bending the rules a tad. We're actually not covering a dinosaur. This week, the spotlight is on Megalania. First, thank you to your boy Blork for the suggestion. And as always, if you got a creature that you want me to spotlight, drop it in the comments. I'll start doing polls when I have a little bit more engagement. But until then, if you want something, put it in the comments and I'll get to it. So, we know this guy wasn't a dinosaur, but, what exactly is it? Well, they're actually varanids, closely related to Komodo dragons and other monitor lizards, and they lived in Australia approximately 50,000 years ago in the late Pleistocene. Megalania also might not be how you're picturing in your head. They're not just like a supersized Komodo dragon. They're actually shorter, stockier, more built for power than speed, at least compared to living varanids. In fact, its limb bones were approximately 45% more robust than living varanids. They likely got up to 3 meters long, with their full length varying depending on the reconstruction, and it's actually a lot smaller than its old estimates of about 7 meters, including the tail. But those estimates were based on modern monitor lizards, which, like I said, recent studies show that they had different proportions. Now, in true Australian fashion, this giant mega monitor lizard was not even an apex predator. Literally, there was a thylacoleo, which is like a marsupial lion, which is more closely related to like koalas and wombats, but you wouldn't guess it looking at them. They really do look like a lion or something. And they were basically built like a tank with these blade-like teeth as their cannon. Now, while I was researching, I feel like I just have to bring this guy up, but I also just learned about this land crocodile called quincana, and it had longer legs, serrated teeth, and probably actually acted more like a pursuit predator rather than like the typical ambush crocodilian that we kind of come to expect. Now, I do feel like I have to point out that quincana wasn't quite as large as Megalania, at least we don't believe it was, so they probably weren't bullying Megalania, but might have been bullying us. We'll get to that when we get to it. Now, since the fossil record is really limited on Megalania, we don't know exactly what it preyed on, but judging from, current monitor lizards and comparing, to obviously the megafauna of the time, we believe it was probably, Diprotrodon, Procoptodon, other, smaller mammals, or even reptiles or birds. They were also likely scavengers, so, they probably weren't afraid of roadkill. Now, where things get interesting is because of how closely related it is to monitor lizards and Komodo dragons, a lot of those are venomous, which means it can be inferred that Megalania very well could have been venomous. And if it was, that would make it the largest venomous vertebrate that we know of, at least for now. Now, to clarify, this isn't 100% a fact because we don't have the evidence for it, but through phylogeny, it's at least a very strong hypothesis. Now, speaking of fossil evidence, like I said, we don't have a lot. Really, we have a couple vertebrae, we have teeth, a little bit of skull material, lower jaw, I think a couple bits of limbs. Obviously not a whole lot, meaning that literally everything that we know about Megalania is just kind of a Frankenstein of these little bits and pieces that we found over the years. Now, this doesn't mean that the animal necessarily was rare. It might just have more to do with how difficult it is for remains to get preserved for, obviously, tens of thousands of years. Some environments preserve animals really well, some environments not so much, and it's very possible that Megalania just existed in an environment where it was less likely to fossilize. Now, super interesting note, you know who else lived in Australia 50,000 years ago? That's right, humans! Possibly. It's thought that Australian Aboriginals came from around 65 to 50,000 years ago, meaning that there's a very real chance that we coexisted with these beasts. And that is such a wild concept to me because, think about it. We weren't dominating ecosystems the way we are now. At the time, yeah, we probably had tools and maybe we had fire, but, we're pretty soft and squishy. So, I'm not taking my chances with a Megalania, not if they're my size. Actually, I'm not taking a chance with one if they're cat size. I don't want to take a chance with my cats. My cats hurt me. Now, that being said, interestingly enough, not long after human arrival in Australia, we start to see the disappearance of much of the megafauna. So, of course, Megalania, but also, Diprotrodon, like we were talking about, Thylacoleo, all of those, they start to kind of dwindle down right when we get there, which isn't direct evidence that we're hunting them all to extinction, because there was also climate change happening at the same time. But this is not unique to Australia. This actually happens kind of everywhere you look. Right around the time humans come into an environment, basically everything starts to die. We really are a plague, aren't we? Yeesh. Now, we kind of took our time to get to the media part of this video. That was on purpose because there's honestly not a lot of media on Megalania, which is kind of crazy because this is a really interesting guy with, a venomous super monitor lizard that coexists with humans, and yet media really doesn't want to give him the props he deserves. I mean, think about it. No big Hollywood roles. Really, if you want to see a good Megalania, you have either video games or documentaries, and that's kind of it for you. And most people, myself included, actually first learned about Megalania through a game called Ark Survival Evolved. I talked about it last week, and I'll probably talk about it more because A, they got a bunch of cool dinosaurs, and B, because it's a fun game that I played. So I like it. Y'all should play it if you haven't, but regardless. Now, honestly, Ark did a really good job with their representation. It definitely leans into the whole monitor lizard thing, both visually and behaviorally, and even includes a infection style venom mechanic that A, kills you really fast. I'll tell you what, if you see him in Ark run away, you're gonna die. But also actually has some amount of logic behind it, not like some representations. Ark's not immune. They have a Dilophosaurus that spits too, but whatever. It also showed up in Path of Titans, which is more grounded than Ark tone-wise, so Megalania is also more grounded than its Ark counterpart, but it also does have a venom mechanic as well that drains stamina, which, again, just further cements venom as a Megalania trait. Now, outside of video games, your best bet for a good Megalania depiction is probably documentaries. So the two ones, at least that I know of, are Monsters We Met, which is like a 2003 documentary from BBC, or more recently, Prehistoric Planet. Monsters We Met featured Aboriginal Australians facing off with this Megalania, and granted, it's pretty dated technologically, so obviously the CGI looks pretty janky, Megalania looks a little janky, but I do like that it at least acknowledged the venom. In this case, they compared it to Komodo dragons because they had a dated understanding. Long story short, Komodo dragons, at one point, we thought that they had bacteria in their mouths, and that was the source of like the venom effect. But upon more research, we actually learned that they do have venom of their own that they produce. Now, in my opinion, the best iteration of a Megalania comes from Apple's Prehistoric Planet. Now, I found a couple of things interesting here. Visually, it really just resembles a giant Komodo dragon, which, to be fair, is kind of how we've had to reconstruct it because, like I said, we don't have a lot of fossils, and at the end of the day, it's a close relative. Figure it's got to be pretty close. So, again, no complaints on that. Now, one thing I really like about it is they showcased its potential climbing ability, which might sound far-fetched because it's huge, but most monitor lizards are very capable of climbing, so there's really no reason to believe that Megalania couldn't. Now, funny enough, this is actually the only piece of media that I'm covering that didn't explicitly acknowledge its venomous possibilities, which, again, I'm not going to hold against it at all because we don't know for a fact that that's actually the case. So, again, not mad, just thought it'd be funny to point out. That's weird. In general, I think this is what makes Megalania so fascinating because this is a really incomplete but fascinating giant lizard that potentially lived with humans. It was potentially the biggest venomous vertebrate of all time. Yet media really hasn't covered him, and I don't know, like that makes him more fascinating to me. The fact that so few people know really what it is. But that's gonna do it for this creature spotlight. If you enjoyed, drop a like, subscribe, hit the notifications, do all those things, and who knows, maybe next time we'll cover a dinosaur. But, no promises. You want to see my cats? I want to show you my cats. This is Athena. This is my roommate's cat. She is so sweet and a little ditzy, but she's so sweet. Ooh. I know. This is Jaeger, happiest of boys, lover of all, very sweet. Lover of food as well. And last but certainly not least is Mushi. This is Mushi. Say hi, Mushi. Say hi. She's a known terrorist. Okay. Thank y'all. That was the end. I also have a snake, but she's hiding, so.